close friend, and I really enjoy the friendship that I have with him. But secondly, he's special because of all that he has done for our community and for our region. When we were doing the budget review this morning, one of the things that we were looking at was the number of grants that the Village of Park Forest has received. And every time we get a grant from the federal government, the state government, Cook County, or whatever, that's money that the taxpayers don't have to spend because it's coming from another source. And that's very important to us because our local tax base is very high, and we want to keep it low to the greatest extent that we can. So when we receive hundreds of thousands of dollars from other sources, that's a great benefit to us. And no one has been more effective in bringing dollars to our community and to our entire South Suburban region than our Congressman Jesse L. Jackson, Jr. Congressman, would you come forward and say a few words this afternoon?
Let me express my appreciation to Mayor Ostenburg for that very kind and very generous introduction. To all of you, the residents of Park Forest, who are spending this time during this month reflecting upon the history of an extraordinary people and extraordinary people who made an extraordinary contribution to an extraordinary nation. When I teach African American history to my children, I share with them that the history of African Americans provides an insight into the entire shape of the United States and the functioning of the United States, and it provides a perspective unlike any other point of view. In part because the history of African Americans precedes the colonies. It precedes the states. It precedes the founding of the Union and the compromises around the Union that made the Union ultimately more perfect. And so I'm reminded of just how rich our heritage is and just how rich our people are every day. Not only on the floor of the Congress where 43 African Americans hail and serve as representatives of the 1965 Voting Rights Act in the Congress of the United States, an act that simply is not possible without the 15th Amendment to the Constitution of 1870, an act that's simply not possible without the 14th Amendment of 1868, an act that's not possible without the 13th Amendment of 1865, without a civil war, without a debate over who should have the power over the institution of slavery, the federal government or the states, and all the way back to the writing of the Constitution itself. And so I want to conclude by saying this. Martin Luther King Jr. once preached a sermon called Remaining Awake Through a Revolution. He preached that sermon on March the 28th, 1968. 6 days later, he would be dead. He said, almost all of us have heard the arresting little story written by Washington Irving about a man called Rip Van Winkle. Rip Van Winkle, we all know the story, went up the mountain and he fell asleep for 20 years. But Dr. King said the most important part about Rip Van Winkle, for which we almost never pay any attention, is not that he slept, but that he slept through a revolution. The evidence that he cites when Dr. King says that when Rip Van Winkle went up the mountain, there was a picture of King George III. And when he woke up 20 years later and came down the mountain, there was a picture of George Washington. We all know that he slept for 20 years, and those 20 years means that he must have slept between 1774 and 1794. What did Rip Van Winkle miss? He missed the Declaration of Independence, that all men and women are created equal. He missed the debate over slavery and the 3/5 compromise in the Constitution. He slept through that. He slept through the First and Second Continental Congresses. He slept through the Bill of Rights. He slept through the most essential part of American history for which our movement has its genesis. For a generation woke up in 1865 and decided what he slept through ought to be changed by amending the Constitution and guaranteeing the end of slavery. The next generation woke up and looked at what Rip Van Winkle slept through and concluded that we needed a 14th Amendment to guarantee every American equal protection of the laws. The next generation looked and woke up and decided that what Rip Van Winkle slept through, we should have the right to vote in the 15th Amendment. Given all of the income inequality in this nation at this hour, with enormous high unemployment, another generation of Americans looked at what Rip Van Winkle slept through and put a 16th Amendment in the Constitution allowing the federal government to tax income for people who were making more money than the average citizen. Another generation woke up and decided with the 19th Amendment that women should have the right to vote. And another generation woke up and decided that we needed a 26th Amendment guaranteeing 18-year-olds the right to vote. For Dr. King said, what does it matter if they can fight and die in Vietnam, but they can't come back home to vote for the very people who put them in the war in the first place? And so here we stand and here we sit, asking ourselves the same questions about our nation and its direction. If we can spend billions of dollars to fight a war in Afghanistan, billions of dollars to fight a war in Iraq, we ought to be able to find enough money to put a man and a woman on their own 2 feet right here in America.